Guru Nation, we are on part 7037, I believe, of a 1 million part series
Very
of
nice.
why we're in the golden era of research sites. I believe, Chris, we're in the golden era. I believe we're in the golden decade. I think sites have a solid decade to make their money, do what they got to do before the landscape changes drastically. I think in favor of massive consolidation and massive technology overlays. I never got your thoughts on this actually, but uh, we have part six of a 10-part series. I'm just being facetious with the
Well,
million.
before I go into my thoughts on that, I would first like to say the topic of today, because I want this on record. I
Yes,
think generally speaking, at least from people that tell me that they like when you and I have conversations because we'll disagree,
right.
I don't think there's going to be any disagreement on today's conversation.
We could
I'm just
find
saying.
stuff. Don't test me on that. Don't. I
I'm
love
just
me a good
saying.
argument.
Just saying. If people hate that expression, just saying.
They
I've
do?
been told
What
this a
kind of
couple
people
times.
are okay, whatever.
Sure. But anyhow, I don't think there'll be much, if any, disagreement on today's topic. Now, in regards to are we in the
Maybe around
golden?
some of the finer nuances or some of the edges, maybe.
Maybe. But I still don't think so. We've talked about this with clients and we both agree on our structure. But anyhow, golden era, well,
Golden
or
decade.
golden decade. Um, I mean, sure, it's possible. Things move very slowly in research, even if like some people we talk to, they state that, and you even kind of agreed with this, I think recently with someone we were talking to, in which research will become patientless, or
They believe that, and I do think that happens too. I'm just not sure if it's in our lifetime. I mean, it's possible. We're both young enough to where we can see that happening, but I don't look
yeah,
that far out when I do these projections. Like even a decade is a lot.
sure.
Um, and this is not happening in this decade.
So
Patientless trials.
I would agree with that just because things move slowly,
Yeah.
but at the
Patientless
same
trials
time,
being the norm. All right,
sure,
because nerds are gonna be like, "Oh, that's already happening." No, I know. I mean, to replace
right, it's
the
highly
day to day.
abnormal. It's
Correct.
highly abnormal,
Correct.
patientless
Correct.
trials.
Correct.
So, but let's just say for a moment, for whatever reason, something just snaps and is changed. Sure, that could happen in 3 years, right? I just don't think so.
First of all, the tech is not there. Second of all, what they're talking about virtual trials requires more than just the genome, and it requires AI compute to like the 10th degree of what we don't even have yet. Like
But
it's not just the genome.
patientless trials and virtual trials are two entirely different things.
Right, I'm talking about in silico trials. Yeah, like
Okay.
patient trials or patient-less trials,
Okay.
where you have your digital twin at a point in time.
Sure.
We change every day, every minute.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of headwinds. Like that is happening. It's not happening right now on a
But then,
pragmatic scale. Like, yes, again, we have a lot of nerds listening. Well, where I work is already, yeah, we know. But,
very
Chris
nice
is
of you, Dan.
laughing because well, there are a lot of nerds listening, man.
Sure.
Can't
But
help it. I'm
to
one.
play to play devil's advocate, you just never know when you're going to get a GFC event as well. And that ends that theory of a
That's
decade
Chris's great financial crash for those wondering.
crisis. GFC, great 2008
Okay,
GFC.
great financial crisis, sure.
Yeah. So if that happens, yeah, there goes the end of that, right? Because that lasted for about 5 years in research.
Yeah, if something like GFC happens, it just further delays in silico trials another decade, I
Sure.
think.
But
So,
in terms of this being the great decade, as you're putting it,
um,
that would
sure,
change that.
it will put it on hold for a few years till things get settled and we'll
Exactly.
just
So I mean,
continue.
there's just too many
It's
variables and
just like putting
unknowns.
pause on a song. All right,
Yeah.
pause it, go use the bathroom, take a
Sure.
dump,
Sure.
and then
Very nice.
come back and then push play again.
Yeah.
No
Fair
biggie.
enough.
No
I'm just
biggie.
saying there's variables and unknowns that you
Of
can't.
course, of course. We're not Nostradamus here.
Right.
We're not the prophets of Delphi that uh telling you guys what, you
Or
know.
RFK says, "Hey, we're gonna do things entirely different too." I mean, you just don't know.
Well, that is teaser for my up and coming full episode reaction to Megyn Kelly's interview with the FDA head, Marquet. I
Hmm.
think it's Macari Marquet. And
Okay.
then I have his book. I'm gonna do a book review on it. I'll read that
Oh,
shit so
very
Guru
nice.
Nation doesn't have to. How about
There you
that?
go. You're saving them.
I'll take one for the team, Guru Nation. Better
Very
subscribe.
nice of you.
Yes. All right, let's get serious here. Standalone, dedicated versus embedded sites. Which should you build? It's not a question of either or. The best networks mix both. Now,
Wait, I disagree with that.
see, so we're gonna disagree. This is
Well,
perfect. Get
initially
your
when
wish.
when you're starting out, it's not an either or in my opinion. If you can have it your way, you're starting in a clinic.
Correct. You're starting with
So
embedded
it's not an
sites.
either or. It's not an either or. It's one option.
Well, it's semantics because it's not a question of either or. The best networks mix both. So this is the ideal.
But that's established.
Right, right.
So when you're starting out, you want to start, and I told you we would agree on this.
Embedded, yes.
Yeah, you want to be embedded for a number of reasons,
I
in
just
my
interviewed
opinion.
Cara Buente, who we met at the SOS in Tucson. She couldn't make it out to this one.
Mhm.
And she's starting her own site. And embedded, she's got the perfect, very similar to Up to Par and Dr. Smith,
Hmm.
almost following the same model. Like, except no equity. Like they're just paying them. So that is the way to go. If you can, if the situation allows for it.
Yep, yep, completely agree. See, agree.
Yeah.
So,
So dedicated versus embedded. If you just want to explain quickly, if you have like a elevator pitch style of the difference.
well, yeah, dedicated's within our existing practice, right? The doctor in whatever
No,
therapeutic area,
embedded. Embedded is within an
excuse me,
existing.
embedded, and then the other would be you're starting exclusively a research site, and
Dedicated,
the
standalone.
yep, and the problem is the two biggest problems are one, cost. It's going to be much more costly to you, and you're taking bigger risks to create a clinical research site opposed to an embedded site.
Correct.
You got to pay rent and all the associated costs. And the other part of it is if you're working with a research naive physician, which usually when you're starting a site, that's generally going to be what you're starting. I believe, and I think the data would back it up, that sponsors or they don't want to work with research naive physicians to begin with, period. I've spoke
Right.
to many sponsors that have said we've literally never worked with a research naive physician. And it's very funny they take this stance because, well, how do doctors get experience if you won't work with them, right?
Aha. But that enter the hero, the entrepreneur.
So they generally will only work with a research naive physician if forced to do so. And
Right. But this is
there's
why the world needs more entrepreneurs.
sure,
These are the heroes on the hero's journey, Chris.
sure,
Are you not excited about this?
but the reason that you don't want to start a research site exclusively a research site with a naive physician is because the first thing they're going to question is, well, you've never had a study. How do you have a database? If you have it within an existing clinic, a private practice that is existing, well, you just point to the lobby and say, well, there's my database,
Mhm.
right? There's patients in the lobby. And sponsors are aware of this. So they're already skittish about believing sites, whether it's in a
So
clinic or a research site, about their patient
you're
population.
absolutely right. And sponsors want the best of both worlds. They want their cake and eat it too.
Yep.
Sponsors need people like me, you, and all the other entrepreneurs out there. Kara, who I just interviewed. They need people like us because they know to get to the destination at the end of this golden era where they can consolidate. Sponsors love predictability above everything else. They don't care about promises. They say they care about diversity. Sure, what they really want, predictability. And in order to get there and layer all their tech that they love, they need these PIs to start getting some experience under their belt, and they're not going to do it. They're going to need people like us to do it. And so this is why this decade is so important. If you're an entrepreneur in this space, this is really your time to get in, my opinion. You could be worried about, oh, well, the economy. I say you don't need to worry about this right now. You need to the lower hanging fruit. The more likely scenario is research does very well this decade. Yes, there might be some economic headwinds, but you don't want to forego that opportunity just because of the potential of some economic calamity, because then you're screwed no matter what, even if you don't try. So it's not like you're eliminating your downside by sitting on the sidelines.
Sure. And some sponsors are also the biggest hurdle in starting a site. Well, there's two, competition and again, being research naive. Those are the two biggest hurdles.
Right.
But some sponsors are even trying to make it more tolerable as far as how they look at it and working with research naive physicians. I know, is it AbbVie? One of the A companies, AbbVie, Amgen, AstraZeneca. I don't remember which one. I think it's AbbVie though.
They would
They
love this, by the way, all
they
of
have
those three.
they have a program in which they're training physicians who they want to work with who are research naive. It's a 6 week program they put these doctors through.
I
They're
think it's
like, yeah,
AbbVie.
I think it is too, but I'm not positive.
Yeah.
We want to award this trial to you, but before we do, you have to take our 6 week program, is the way they're doing it. We'll
Yeah.
award you this study, but first you have to take this 6 week program, which is actually, in my opinion, it's actually quite nice of the sponsor. It's like, this is how we'll tolerate working with you as a research naive physician.
Yeah, I'm sure to qualify for that, you need to be in a private practice. And
You do.
even then, this is not even the topic of this podcast, but even then,
There's always got to be tangents, right?
of course, that's why it's Random Musings is the name of the podcast. But even then, like from all my experiences, and I'm sure all of yours, to get a PI, like a not even a PI yet, a busy, can you imagine Dr. Smith or Dr. Harris, who you spoke to yesterday, to do a 6 week course, like
Yeah,
while they
right.
are overworked in their clinics and like there is no way. So as nice and ambitious as that is, I imagine the output is not that busy clinician. Because do you know any busy like Dr. Z? Would he do this 6 week
Uh,
course?
if it's a live class, no, right? But if it's recorded, he would. I think he would.
I think they would
Um,
say they would and then never show up.
well, I mean, of course, as we all know, there's ways around these things.
Sure, but doesn't
Um,
that defeat the purpose that
it
AbbVie is
does.
trying to do?
Sure,
Like,
it does.
so at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is bypass the entrepreneur hero journey. Like, there's no way around it. You need
Well,
the
I disagree. I
entrepreneur.
think some physicians would do this. I really do.
I do too. And I think the ones that would are not busy. And that's the ones you don't want in research. Like the busy ones that are seeing diverse patients and underserved and like they are underserved for a reason.
Hmm.
It's not like a title they chose.
Right.
They're in an underserved community for a reason. And
Hmm.
so for you to say join the 6 week course where you're just talking in abstract about these guys have already done 10 years of school.
Well, and it also depends on how complex that course is. Because if it's a 1 hour a week course, any doctor could do that. Everyone can find an
Even
hour.
that,
They
I'm
just,
telling
I
you,
understand they won't. They would rather be golfing or something
do you
else.
know how, like we spoon feed them with the Zoom links? Here's a Zoom link.
Right.
We tell them a minute before as well. Here, click it. Let me resend it. Let me like, and they still don't do it.
See, and here's where the problem lies, right? Because sponsors just don't understand that, yeah, doctors will do research, but only if it's convenient to them oftentimes because they make plenty of money with their private practice, which is where the patients are that the sponsors need.
That's right.
So, unless it's convenient to them, whatever the task might be, they're not going to do it because they really don't care about your study too much. They
What
honestly
this
don't.
what those sponsors really should do is put their PI's designee to be their coordinator or site director in this course. That's what they
Sure.
really should be doing.
But they will never do that.
Yeah, of course, because then the optics are, well, you're not even
Yep.
training them.
Yep.
It boils down to like liability and regulations and regulatory burden and all this stuff. This is
Sponsors
why
need,
we're here, man. This is
well,
why me and
there
you are
is,
here.
there is a way to get PIs to be more compliant with these types of tasks, but sponsors don't want to do that either. It's just pay them. Can I swear on this?
Fuck
They,
yeah.
okay, so just pay the physician that you're interested in courting to do research a shitload of money to do this, right? So then it becomes very worthwhile to the physician to actually do it.
Darshan would
That,
object here.
well, I don't care. You can object all you like. So that's one way to overcome this hurdle. It's to truly overcome it, right? So let's take Dr. Smith as an example, who's
Yeah.
has a very busy and successful private practice. Very busy, very successful, makes a lot of money doing it.
Mhm.
You're gonna pay him $200 to do this course. He's gonna give you the bird, right? Like fuck you, you're insulting me, right? But if you were to pay him, say, fifty
No, he
thousand
wouldn't.
dollars,
Yeah, yeah.
he'll say, okay, when do I go, right?
Nah, I think even he wouldn't.
Well, no, if it's reasonable, right?
Right,
If they said,
right.
okay, we need 10 hours of your time over a 6 week period, he would say, okay, what's the schedule look like? And then he would still consider it wouldn't be a
Exactly.
guaranteed.
Exactly.
Does this fit my schedule?
And every variable you just added here is just decreases the probability of this being successful for
But what I'm
AbbVie.
saying is there are ways around this that doctors will honestly consider doing it and truly legitimately doing it, but you have to pay them accordingly. And
Right.
sponsors are looking their business. I mean, they want to get away with as minimal cost as possible.
Well, and even the ones that have money to throw around are worried of regulatory oversight. And I mean, they have plenty of Darshans on their team that tell them no.
But why?
And
Why can't you pay a doctor to do something?
because they're told all these things, Sunshine Act and fair market value. And
But
if you
does the
hammer that
sunshine wait,
home,
wait, I know you're not Darshan and I'm asking you to
yeah,
speak
I'm
as
not
such.
like being an apologist of Darshan,
No, no,
but
no,
I'm
but
telling you that, okay, go, because
what
there is a philosophy here too.
does the Sunshine Act dictate in this? Because the Sunshine Act, say that 5 times fast. It just says you have to, as a sponsor, you have to report what you pay a physician.
Right.
It doesn't make it illegal to say here's 50 grand to take our course.
Just
That's
the
not
threat.
illegal. You just have to report it.
Just the threat alone of something being auditable is enough hesitation for these sponsors. Remember, these are not entrepreneurs at these pharma companies. These are lifetime managers that are risk averse by nature.
But what's audible? The FDA is going to audit and say, hey, you paid them too
It
much?
wouldn't be the
What?
FDA, it's the other groups. It's not DOJ either. I think it's CMS or something. It's not FDA. But you're the regulators, whoever's in charge of this. Darshan would tell us right away who it is. It's enough
Well,
for them, man. And these guys at
but
AbbVie
is,
and
wait,
Takeda and
wait.
all they're
I
just trying
still
to
have
keep
an
their
argument.
jobs. They're trying to keep their jobs. They're not
Sure,
trying.
but Sunshine Act used to be a common excuse for sponsors not to pay a certain dollar on budgets, but they don't, I've
Right.
not seen this in years. Not seen it in years where
Right.
they
They
say,
probably
because of the Sunshine Act, we can't pay you this. It's like, yeah,
sure, sure.
bullshit. Yes, you can.
Sure. There's other ways, like Darshan will, if you put Darshan in a room with anyone from AbbVie, and AbbVie has these people on their team already, and not just AbbVie, I don't want to pick on them, but like any sponsor, they have a council of people telling them, no, we can't, we have to be careful with the optics and how this looks, and is there another way? And it boils down to, does the middle manager at a very comfortable pharma company want to lose their job over an innovation in how they recruit new doctors? Or are they okay with keeping their job? You're not getting fired by maintaining status quo.
Oh, I agree with that entirely,
And this
right?
is why you need
Why?
people like me and you, even though your camera's blurry,
Is it?
your thesis is very clear. We're
Well, I
gonna
can leave
make it
and come
happen.
back. It'll be clear, clear again.
I'm just messing with you, man. But this is why people need people like us. This is why the entrepreneur are the heroes, the hero journey of this whole story.
Well, no,
And why,
I completely agree. Somebody who has a salary and is employed and can lose their job for doing something perceived as radical,
correct,
yeah, they're not going to take that risk.
correct,
Why would they?
correct.
I like my comfortable job.
And even the ones on the edges at these places, this is probably how things like this AbbVie thing even got started. That's considered a radical, non-traditional, but it's
Hmm.
done what it's nerfed to such an extent that it's almost defeats the purpose of doing it.
Yeah.
So it becomes just like good for optics.
Yep.
And maybe you get one or two, like, oh, okay, and then you high five each other because you got a new PI. But does that really put a dent in diversity in research? Does it put a dent in any of these
And I would love to take the
KPIs?
I would love to take this class because I bet you it's almost worthless. And no, again, no offense to Abby.
Yeah, Abby, just pretend we are using your name as a placeholder for
It is
sponsor in
for
general.
yeah,
But I love AbbVie, Takeda, Lilly. These are the
yeah,
ones that are actually
certainly.
trying to do stuff.
They're trying to find a way.
They shouldn't
Yes.
be the brunt of our jokes. We should be making fun of like Mercs and these people that are the
And just
worst, by the way.
and just to clarify, I have no idea if this program's worthwhile or not. I'm just saying I would speculate that it's not. I haven't
Sure.
taken it. I do know one PI who has. I haven't talked to them about it. I know them from an intermediary that they took it,
Okay.
their coordinator.
Yeah.
And they haven't told me if it was worthwhile or not because I don't think they even know,
And I
right?
don't think they care. They see it as their gateway to get into doing studies.
Exactly, exactly. But
So,
the
yeah,
the point is, I don't doubt real useful information is taught.
correct. Man, it's gonna be a longest part six of a 10-part series ever. We're way off topic. Well,
All
we're
right,
kind of
pulls
coming
back to
back.
topic then.
Well, we discussed the difference between dedicated and embedded, also known as de novo. This matters more now than ever. There's FDA diversity pressure, which the new administration coming in has said we are not touching the diversity initiatives implemented. Like we removed the DEI language from government website doesn't mean we don't want minorities in studies.
No, and I completely, sorry to interrupt. I completely agree with that. I don't
Right. Well,
think,
people on LinkedIn are confused about this.
right. So there's a difference between meritocracy and a need for actual science. Those are two different things,
Right,
right?
right. But let's because that's gonna take us away. If we went off
No, I'm
course,
just saying I agree with it shouldn't be touched because you should have representation for the demographics of your country. Makes complete sense. That's a completely different argument than meritocracy.
yes. But like the point is, this stuff matters. It's worth your time if you're a doctor, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're someone considering opening a site, it's worth your time to figure this out because there you have, in my opinion, potential rewards from doing this. And that's because there is a need. Um, and still, in 2025, less than 10% of US sites are part of a network. So 90% of sites are standalone, whether they are dedicated research sites, like with not embedded or a combo. It's still 90% of sites are not part of a site network. So you have plenty of rewards. There's a li very liquid market willing to buy you out, willing to roll you up, uh, willing to, if you want to be the platform like us, be the platform and start doing it.
But
So,
but you do have to be semi-successful, right? You can't just start
of
a
course,
clinic, have one study, and somebody's going to buy you. That's not going to happen.
no, but and that's maybe where we get into this. It's not that hard to be semi-successful as a site owner. Like you and I have both done monitoring stuff. You and I have both done,
Like a little bit of everything,
yeah,
really.
sponsor work. I think it's much more difficult to be a CRA and make 300K a year, which is almost impossible on your life and your health and your time, versus being a site owner. Like you can be a site owner, not really know what you're doing and get lucky on the right study or two and make 300K. Like that, it's just the same output, 300K a year, completely different effort that needs to go into achieving that output. And like you have a lot of these CRAs breaking their backs out there trying to make money. The problem with CRAs is they think they understand. You and I discuss this a lot because we talk to a lot of these people. One of them was yesterday. We talked to CRAs and then we talked to former coordinators that want to do it on their own. If you're asking me, I'm investing in that former coordinator to be my site director than a former CRA, and 9 times out of 10. Unless that CRA shows me something, willingness to understand, but the coordinator already knows that. Like, you know, so it requires different mentality, basically, to start a site. But the rewards are there, and it's actually easier to achieve certain financial outcomes than it is working for a paycheck. But yeah, unless you have something to disagree with on that.
No, I don't.
Dedicated sites we kind of discussed. So we have both at Yuma clinical trials now. We started as an embedded site within Dr. Smith's private practice. By the time we got our second and third specialists, that they didn't have as accommodating office setup in their offices, so we had to get our own space as well, in addition to our embedded site. And now our cardiologist, Chris, I didn't even tell you, he actually has a similar setup to Smith, where it's not all the way as Smith, like where we have our own office within Smith's office, but we he does want us to see patients in his office. So it's kind of like a mix. We don't have our own dedicated space there. We still have our outside space. But for seeing patients, he actually prefers in his office so that we can see them and he can be there for the safety oversight and things like that. So I would say that one is more of a 50% embedded, 50% standalone because we do some of the stuff like the routine visits
Uh,
standalone and then like the dosing visits are done at the PI's office.
so, just out of curiosity, because I don't think I've ever actually asked you this, but do any sponsors take issue with what we're doing in terms of the hub and spoke model?
They'll ask questions like, well, why is it both on the 1572? And as long as you tell them and we revise their SOP to allow that, they don't have issues anymore.
So you've never had a sponsor take issue. Like they won't award the study because you have this
Um,
arrangement.
I had one sponsor tell me that they would prefer it's done in Smith's office just
The entire
because,
everything's done in Smith's office.
um, yes, because the IP. So they wanted the IP in the same place where the patients will be seen. But that was one. The other ones are more accommodating to however we want to work it. And if it's not Smith or the cardiologist, it's all done in our other location, our standalone site, like IP, everything there. So, um, they don't really have problems. They'll ask question why, and then you say, well, it's easier for the PI to have oversight, and then that's it. They're okay with that. So
So
they're fine.
do you ever, with any of your physicians there, do you ever have the patient who's seen by the coordinator, say at the standalone site, and then take the patient either drives themselves or is taken over to where the physician is to be seen by them? Does that ever happen?
Um, no, if we already know before the visit that where we want to do the visit, because if they're
Okay.
gonna need a clinician and like our NP is not available, we will have to do it at the PI's office.
So in all instances, regardless of structure and what you foresee the study will be, you list both
Yeah, yeah,
as where the patient could be potentially seen.
yeah. And if they're really pushing as to why, because sometimes you get these anal people that are like, no, we don't see the reason. I say it's more monitoring space here. And we put it here basically for extra monitoring space for you to make sure your monitors are comfortable. And that's usually enough to,
So with the hub and spoke model, you have to have some understanding between yourself and the PI on what will be dictated in terms of IP is probably the biggest issue, right? Where is it
yes,
going to be stored? Is it
yes,
okay that they're dosed here or at your clinic? Which do you prefer? That kind of thing, right? So you have to have an
yeah,
understanding in order to implement this hub and
yeah.
spoke model.
And it's study by study because some studies are considered riskier as far as the IP, and even the NP maybe is not comfortable overseeing it by himself. And so then that we would do those visits, like the dosing visits at the PI's
Okay.
office.
So what I hear from that is if a site's considering this model, they have to have IP storage facilities within the PI's office. That always has to be a consideration.
You can do a transportation log.
Okay.
We've done that too.
Okay, so if it's not available, you will just ship the
Yeah, we're all the clinics are within like 7 minutes driving distance of each other. So
do they require
what we'll
temperature
do,
monitoring? This I'm
yeah,
sorry.
we have a temperature like a car transporter thing with
Okay, that's
temperature
refrigerated.
monitoring. Yeah. And yeah, you just plug it in and it's like a cooler and then you
Yeah.
keep the log. But really it's like if you have both addresses on your 1572, no one even asks for the transportation log. They just assume, okay, it's done where it's housed. That's like the kind of loophole around it. If you have both addresses, only like an auditor would ask,
Hmm.
right? Your monitor is going to say, okay, well, that's on the drug is out on the 1572 as well. So they don't care as long as like patient safety is being adhered to, and which is the reason why we dose typically not at most drugs, no, but it's the more riskier ones like the MABs and the infusions, those are done at the doctor's office.
The only situation I could foresee in which this would not work would be a scheduled drug, one or two. I don't think they would allow this.
Um,
I think in that situation, you
Schedule
would
two,
ha
yeah, you have to do it where the license is. Correct.
exactly the DA license.
Correct. And one of our PIs, two of them have it. So we can always use their locations for even for the other PIs if we
R-
wanted.
Right, but in that situation, you have to have IP storage at wherever the DA
Correct.
license
With the
is,
DEA, don't mess around.
and it has to be dosed there. I
Correct.
don't think you can transport it in that situation.
Not with a controlled substance, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I wouldn't mess around with that. So it's study specific, but as long as this is typically how we do it, we either choose to do all the assessments and things at a doctor's office, or we do them all at our standalone. There are some situations where there are hybrids, but it's generally easier to pick one or the other. And with our cardiologist, we actually have a good amount of hybrids because he has IP storage capability, but it's not as secure as ours. And one of our buildings, we have backup generators too, so that's good. Okay, carrying forward. Embedded sites. I mean, we kind of discussed, but there's pros and cons of both. So with the embedded sites, you have that database from your PI, which you have in your standalone site too, if you're using a hub and spoke model. If you're not using a hub and spoke model and you're just having the PIs come to you, but you don't get access to their database. So we actually have this example too. The good thing about Yuma clinical trials is we have like almost all of these examples in some way. So what our nephrologist, you know her husband pretty well. He's actually texting us right now.
Yeah.
His wife,
I was just looking at the text actually.
yeah, his wife is a PI of ours. We have yet to get her a study, but she's a nephrologist. But she's not the owner of her private practice. She's just an employee. We do not have access to her EMRs. So in her case, all the studies we do under her when we start doing them is going to be at our standalone site. So in her example, we are a standalone site with her as a PI. Her private practice is not actually owned by her. So it's owned by a corporation. So we cannot recruit her patients unless she like handpicks them for us, which she's very rarely going to do. So we're
Hmm.
dependent on things like patient A's or recruiting from our other PI's databases, because Dr. Smith has kidney patients too, and so does the cardiologist. So it just becomes a network effect at some point where the more PIs you have, the more you can recruit from their databases to your other PIs' databases. And most of the time they don't care because they already have a working relationship with you. So they're not. You always ask them to be nice, but if the patient's already been in your database as the site, you can put them in any study you want. But if they're technically existing from your PI, you want your referral from your other doctor for your specialist. But you just ask, and usually you'll be granted. But that's the example of like a standalone site where you actually don't have access to someone's EMR. Um, Now you have more space. The benefits of having a standalone site or a dedicated research center, you control the space, you control the layout, you don't need to ask permission. Can I use this lab? Can I borrow this centrifuge? I know early on in the YCT days, we were like sharing space with their phlebotomist centrifuge, and there were times where things got, people were getting upset. Like, well, you can't tell your patients not to put their urine here. We almost used theirs. We mixed it up. Like, there, you will be stepping on toes at some point. You, as nice as they may be, you will be. And so you have to like respect the rules when you're in someone else's house. But when you're in your own place, you don't need to worry about any of that. So that's kind of the pros of that. And I think the best of both worlds is kind of to have the hub and spoke. Like you kind of can cherry pick which situation applies to which would apply best to your studies.
The only scenario in which I would say that's not the case is if you're just not busy enough, right? If you have one or two studies at the embedded site and there's plenty of room for those, there's no need to look to expand until there is a need, right?
Right. And
So just
and
don't create a hub and spoke because,
no, 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 no. I mean, we didn't do that until like a year and a half in, maybe 2 years in, where the PI moved us upstairs, right? And
yep,
then because I mean, we're still using the upstairs space, but it was like we were getting so many more studies, there was no way we were going to fit everything in there. So we had to
yep,
get our own space just for storage.
yep. And the only reason I make that added that information is because you would not believe the number of people I speak to, Dan, that say, well, Dan said, and it's like, yeah, there's something missing in that context.
Yeah, I mean, don't quote me on a lot of these things, guys, especially don't quote me out of context. So you got to listen to the whole thing. And then even then, I'll fuck up sometimes. And by the way, just because I do it doesn't mean it's right. It's
Right.
just my experience. Like,
Yep.
I could be wrong, but it's just a model. Like, it's another alternative. Like, at least I'm showing that this is how I do it, for better, for worse. There's probably better ways to do anything.
Well, I think people just oftentimes hear what they want to hear,
That
or
too.
or they're not understanding that you just, for brevity, left something out, right? And which
Yeah.
in which I just added, just don't do it to do it, right?
Don't do it
Have
to
a
do it.
reason to do it.
Right. When you cannot take another study because there's no place to put the lab kits and they're going to send like 20 boxes
Yep.
and your PI is going to be cussing you out because there's no more room, like
Hmm.
it's probably time to consider some extra space,
Yep.
and that,
Yep.
but don't do it from day one where you don't have shit going on. And
Right. Like one of our first clients, we have a consulting service for those who are wondering what I'm
oh
referring
man, we're
to.
40 minutes in. I haven't plugged that yet. Unbelievable.
But we have a consulting service. And one of our very first clients, both Dan and I spoke to on the regular, and we both told them because they were saying, hey, I want to hire staff. It's like, do you have a study? No. Well, I'm going to hire staff anyhow. It's like, okay, well, don't do that. We both, I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember this conversation, but they hired
Yes.
like three coordinators and had no study
I
and
know.
they went broke. It's like, well,
I know.
uh, that was like the dumbest thing you could have done.
You could hire yourself to do nothing too for 3 months, so
Yeah,
or to
right.
do very little. Yeah, don't hire staff just because like you
Or
think,
don't expand.
or don't expand for the sake of expanding. Don't hire for the sake of hiring. I sometimes we're not even in year 4 yet. In December will be year 4 years of having studies here at Yuma. I will hire preemptively now because I know it takes 3 months to train someone.
Hmm.
But that's because I see like the future study pipeline. It's not because
You're
I'm hoping.
established. You're
Yeah, it's not because I'm
established.
hoping that, you know, the gods will shine brightly on me and give me studies. Like I already kind of have a reasonable expectation, and if that were to change, I know I can make changes too. But yeah, not from day one. No, man, it was me and Jaime, and then we hired, I think 6 months in, our first coordinator.
Funny ending to that story of that client though, because they were with us for a dozen years. They're no longer with us, by the
And
way.
I know who it is.
Yeah. But they were hugely
I
successful.
know. They sold, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah. Hugely successful. Multi-million dollar site
But they
yearly.
went broke first.
Yeah. They went broke because they didn't want to listen to our advice. We
Hey,
both told
man. I
them the
mean,
same
there you go.
thing.
Don't listen to us and you'll be highly successful.
Yeah.
That's the lesson.
Yeah. Don't spend money you don't need to spend.
Now, ultimately, you will get to a hybrid strategy. There's just no way around it.
Hmm.
You cannot grow forever in your doctor's private practice.
Unless it's just absolutely huge, right?
If it's huge, correct. I mean, there are situations where that happens. It's just I haven't seen it yet,
Mhm.
in my experiences, and I don't think from others I've talked to either.
Yeah, but like who this applies to is that smaller private practice, which the doctor wants to add a new source of revenue and says, yeah, I can do a couple studies here. And that's what you're getting yourself into most often. You're not getting into some huge group of physicians
Right, right.
in which there's almost unlimited space or whatnot. So yeah, you're going to eventually have to implement this
Yes.
structure.
Yeah, you have to implement it. Another thing is like as you start getting more complex, your SOPs will too. That you're supposed to. So like
Hmm.
even ours, like right now, I have to look at them and see if I need to revise them. But they're the more things you start doing, like hub and spoke and hybrid, you need to have it covered in your SOP. And I think we do for the most part. We don't have all of our workflows. Like I didn't put Monday in there because it's not really part of any study. It's just internal workflow. But we have like Creo SOPs and we have SOPs for, I believe it's just Creo. For something like Monday.com, if it's a tool you're using just to monitor employee workflow, I don't think you need a SOP for that.
How about
But when
something
it
like
comes to like study specific things, you do need a SOP for.
how about something like Viva?
Or they give you their own SOPs
Do they?
for the E-reg, yeah. But you need that. But like when you start getting into like transporting IP,
Oh yeah, definitely need an SOP.
yes, yes. So make sure like keep it simple in the beginning. I think the first 2 years you can kind of get by, and that was almost exact our situation in Yuma,
Yeah,
like to
you
almost
updated them as sponsors became more demanding of how exactly does this work? This is not specific enough, I assume.
correct, correct. But when we had like in embedded in Dr. Smith's office, that lasted like a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and then we expanded. We had to change some SOPs at that point because we got other providers, and then like each provider, we had a different LLC name for that specialty, but we all used the same YCT SOPs. So we had like we have to have like this note to file that we put in front of our SOP that even though this company is Yuma Pulmonary Research, the employees and SOPs are Yuma Clinical Trials. That way the sponsors don't ask like, what's the SOP, where's the SOP for this one? Well,
Hmm.
this is the note to file. This is the parent company, so that's why we use it.
Hmm.
And that's been okay. There haven't been any issues with that. But
Yeah,
it
so
does
long
get
as
more
it's
complex on the reporting side.
with anything in research, so long as it's clear and it's understandable, that's really all they want. It's just notation. They know everyone operates differently. So long as it's
Yeah.
clear and it makes sense, they're good. Usually.
Now, the interesting thing as we wrap up, these site networks, when they acquire, like if someone were to acquire YCT, I think we will go the route of doing the acquisitions and the onboarding with PE help. But whoever ends up buying us at the end, right? They will probably buy a bunch of sites that are standalone for the most part that started as embedded. So there are elements that are still embedded. Like when they buy YCD, they're still going to have an upstairs at Dr. Smith's, but like 90% of the site is actually like standalone. And so what you're going to have by 2035 is a bunch of site networks that are mostly standalone, but they have loose connections with like community clinics. And I
Hmm.
think that's what the site networks are actually doing. And so what you're actually acquiring is not really the doctor's private practice, it's the standalone site with a relationship to the doctor that you are acquiring. So yes, it's important. It's also complicated because if there's a new ownership group, does your doctor still want the new group to go upstairs in their office? You know, they're cool with me and my staff going there, but they don't know these bankers. Like, do they
Hmm.
want them going up there? And you're probably gonna have to have conversations with your PI. This is why I bring them on as equity partners. Or if
More
that's not
inclined
the
to do
case,
so.
yes. And if that's not the case, you have to have a talk with them. Like, yeah, these guys are gonna keep paying you the same. Matter of fact, they might even pay you better or give you a salary, or pay you rent for your use, whereas we didn't. You know, there's always
But
some pros and cons to it.
but in this acquisition scenario, usually it's a 5-year process, so there's plenty of time for the PI to acclimate to the new system.
Yes. Yes, and the way these site networks are built. So if you've been running studies in Yuma, let's say for 10 years, right? By the time that 5-year acquisition thing is over, let's say Yuma Clinical Trials has been running studies in Yuma for 5 years. Regardless of where these patients came from, our own database now is pretty big. So even if the site network acquires us, and let's say one of our PIs retires, like, nah, I'm not on board with this. I'm just gonna retire. Because now you have scale, you can bring in a specialist. They don't need a private practice. You just bring in a specialist to do those studies and pay them a salary, and you have patients already from your database that you can enroll in future studies. So there are like these economies of scale that these site networks have, and hey, let's call our Phoenix nephrologist because the Yuma nephrologist retired. So we have an interim nephrologist going between Phoenix and Yuma until we figure out what we're doing with nephrology, and that can still work. And that's why these PEs like they see it as kind of risk off in a way when they do this because they know that okay, well, if this PI in Yuma gets hit by a bus, we have another pulmonologist in Phoenix that can do it. And they already said they're willing to go on like Mondays and Wednesdays for X amount of dollars. And there's no equity involved. So it's actually they make more money doing it too that way.
Hmm. Hmm.
Let's just risk off for them. Yeah, maybe we're getting over our skis a bit.
So did we touch on everything you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, and we didn't really argue. You were right.
Yeah, there was no disagreement.
Yeah, I mean there always is some, but yeah,
No,
I
there
think
was none. Let us know in the comments. Was there any disagreement between Dan and I?
probably not. Probably not. Our main disagreement would be, and it's really set part seven of this 10-part series, when do you start using tech? I would say use it up front, and you're on the record saying you don't use it yet till you get money.
Mm, so the only reason I say that, and it's not that I recommend not using it up front. I just tell new sites because that's what we deal with primarily. It's up to them if they are for sure, regardless of how this works out initially, going to stick with it. Then sure, invest in it now. If you're still on the fence whether or not this is something you want to do, you just kind of want to dip your toes into it and see. Yeah, there's no point in making that investment until you know for sure.
Yeah,
That's what I tell them.
I don't disagree with you on that. I don't disagree. And there's plenty of options out there. I know I'm sponsored by Creo. I love them, but there's other options. And then there's Monday, there's free versions of a lot of these things.
Mhm.
Viva is free, Inato is free. They're not going to work with you. Inato, you're not going to get any benefit if you don't have experience for your PIs, but it's free when you do. We just actually turned down a study today on Inato. My coordinator was telling me she asked the PI and he doesn't think we can enroll, so we turned it down. But back in the day, we would have taken that one too.
Sure. Before we go,
Yeah.
because I assume we're kind of phasing out here
I got to do a
towards the
test
ending.
drive in 8 minutes, but it's a long
Yeah,
story.
I during our conversation, I thought of a video you could make from the PE perspective, right, on acquiring sites.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a bad idea, but uh, should a PE acquire a site in which they're really reliant upon any one or two PIs, right? Or should there be backup and how to protect themselves from that?
And that's related to this last kind of diatribe I went on about risk on, risk off.
That's
Because,
why I thought of it though. But how would they contractually protect themselves? I was thinking if they acquire a site and a year later the main PI is retired, there should be some sort of financial penalty to that or something, right?
There's a school of thought on this. I mean, I've thought about this a lot lately, but in our situation, for example, all of our PIs, well, two of them now, there's no equity. There's
Hmm.
the nephrologist and the cardiologist are just contractors.
But
I
doesn't
think
that,
they will want equity at some point. We can make little LLCs for them. But you're right, to a PE, that would be more risky than
exactly,
Smith,
exactly.
or the others.
They want them to have skin in the game. You would
Yes,
think.
yes, but if it is not the main revenue driver, if it's just like add-ons, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, that's still, what if that therapeutic area blows up and that does become the main
Hmm.
driver, right? That's the argument. Okay, this is why economies of scale matter. I think that if you have geographic coverage that's reasonable, you reduce some of your risk. Because if you
So,
have like in Phoenix, I use Phoenix because they have the same license. You pay them and they already agreed they're going to come in or even they move. Like there are
yeah.
some of these nephrologists or whatever specialists straight out of med school. And if you're a site network that owns 50 sites, I mean, you can probably find somebody willing to move for the right price. And you tell them, hey, it's only a 3-year deal, but we're going to give you upside. And I mean,
So,
there's plenty that would say yes.
so you would say equity firms, in which I would agree, at least I think that's what you're saying, they would be more inclined to acquire a site or a network if all of the PIs, or at least the main ones, are part owner.
Yeah, because then their equity rolls into the new company
Yeah.
equity.
And they have skin in the game. They're more likely not to
Right.
quit,
As opposed to the contractors who,
can just quit, walk away.
sure, and both can walk away, but one is less
Way less
likely
likely.
because of the incentives. Right. So it becomes
And it
an
would aff
incentive game.
and it would affect those incentives
Yeah.
if they leave.
But you can instill incentives as well with
Sure,
the contractors.
sure.
And if you have enough coverage, like this is where the network effect comes in.
But you could do a whole video on this.
I mean, it's part of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, from this 10-part series, I don't even know what the next ones are, but yeah, who
To
cares?
be decided.
It's just arbitrary 10 because it sounded good, but
Sure.
could have been
To,
20,
that's
could
why I
have been
said
5.
TBD.
Sure. It could have just been a 10-hour video, or it could be 1 hour, 10, or it could have been 20, 30 minutes, like whatever.
Sure.
And I think next year or the year after, like if things change significantly, add some new insights to it. But I don't think the fundamentals change anytime soon of this kind of business.
I agree. And you must go. You have a test drive.
Yes. Vroom,
A-
vroom.
And I must go use the restroom. TMI?
No, but I do recommend stinging nettle root extract. It's great for the prostate.
Uh,
When you get a little older, Chris. One of these days you'll understand.
one of these
When you
days. I'm
get to
still a
my
young
age.
lad.
When you get to my age, you'll understand. Also, FYI, don't take this on an empty stomach.
Gives you
Maybe
cramps.
that's TMI. All right. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and maybe next time we'll argue. Bye bye.